Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a really significant legal case, Bangayan v. People. It seems to fundamentally reinterpret sexual consent for minors under Philippine law, specifically Republic Act 7610.
That's right. And our focus today really is trying to understand how a conviction for sexual abuse involving a 12-year-old girl was overturned by the highest court.
Especially considering the huge age gap, right?
Yeah.
15 years.
Exactly. And the fact that the relationship actually continued seems to be central to the acquittal. It sort of redefines what counts as coercion in these situations.
Okay, so lay out the basic facts for us. They are pretty stark.
They are. In January 2012, the accused, Rodan Bangayan, who was 27 at the time, had sexual intercourse with the victim, identified as AAA, who was just 12 years and 1 month old.
12? Wow.
Yeah. Her family found out, charges were filed. But here's the twist the Supreme Court later zeroed in on. The couple stayed together.
Stayed together after the charges were filed.
Yes. And they went on to have 2 children together. The first, born later that same year, October 2012, and a second in May 2015.
That context is challenging. How did the initial courts handle it?
Well, the regional trial court and then the Court of Appeals both convicted Bangayan. No hesitation.
On what grounds?
Their reasoning was pretty clear, given the 15-year age gap and what they called Bangayan's moral ascendancy.
Meaning his influence over her. He was related somehow.
Yes, he was the brother of her older sister's husband, so a position of some authority or influence within the extended family.
Okay.
So the lower courts basically said because of that power dynamic, her consent, even if given, was legally irrelevant, completely immaterial.
And the Court of Appeals agreed. They upheld the conviction.
They did. They specifically rejected the idea of a sweetheart theory, arguing this was a genuine relationship. They said that defense doesn't fly in these child protection cases.
But then it goes to the Supreme Court and everything changes.
Completely flips. The Supreme Court found the petition had merit and they acquitted him, overturned both lower court convictions.
How? What was the legal justification for such a different outcome?
This is where it gets legally very specific. The SC clarified the law, R.A. 7610, particularly Section 5B.
Okay.
They ruled that for victims aged 12 up to below 18, consent can actually be a valid defense.
Really? So it's not automatic abuse just based on age in that bracket?
Not automatically. The law, as interpreted by the SC here, only punishes intercourse in that specific age group if it involves things like money, profit, or, crucially, proven coercion, intimidation, or undue influence by the adult.
The burden was on the prosecution to prove that coercion.
Exactly. And the court felt they hadn't met that burden.
And the ongoing relationship, the kids, that played into the court's view of coercion.
Massively. Yeah. The SC pointed to the continued cohabitation, the children, and importantly, an affidavit of desistance from the victim herself.
She filed a statement withdrawing the complaint.
Essentially, yes. She confirmed they were living together as husband and wife. The court took this as evidence that, looking back, there wasn't the required level of coercion, intimidation, or influence at the time of the initial act.
That feels controversial, like using later events to judge the initial act.
It definitely raises questions, and they also explicitly rejected the lower court's idea of moral ascendancy based just on the age gap and family connection.
So the 15-year difference wasn't enough on its own to prove undue influence?
Not for the Supreme Court majority, no. They argued criminal law needs to differentiate between this kind of consent and, say, the legal capacity to sign a contract. They even mentioned needing to consider teenage psychology.
Teenage psychology?
Yeah.
But surely not everyone agreed with this interpretation.
Absolutely not. There was a very strong dissent from Justice Leonin.
What was the core of the dissent's argument?
Justice Leonin focused squarely on the victim's age and vulnerability. The argument was, how can a 12-year-old, barely in 6th grade, give mature, informed consent to something with such huge life and reproductive consequences?
Makes sense. Did the dissent mention the psychological aspect?
Very much so. It highlighted findings from a social welfare officer, noting the victim had hampered development and, significantly, a longing for a parental figure.
Ah, so the dissent saw that as the vulnerability Bangayan exploited.
Precisely. The dissent argued that exploiting that psychological need is a form of coercion or undue influence under the law, regardless of whether they later formed a family unit.
So, wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway here for understanding the law now?
Well, this ruling creates a really sharp distinction based on age. Below 12, consent is never a defense, but from 12 up to 17...
It's more complicated.
Right. The burden is firmly on the prosecution to prove actual exploitation money, force, or that demonstrable coercion or undue influence. The age gap alone isn't automatically enough, even a significant one, like 15 years.
It really forces you to question the nature of consent in these unequal relationships.
It does, and it leaves us with a difficult question. When does psychological influence, like preying on a young person's emotional needs, cross the line into legally recognized coercion? Especially when we consider if a young teen's capacity for sexual consent aligns with their emotional maturity to handle everything that follows.